I went to Washington, D.C. after I graduated undergrad. And so Princeton is a place that's very dry for Black women. I don't know if people like have attended predominantly white like schools, but in some of these spaces, it can just feel like Black women don't get play like that. And by play, I mean like romantic attention. And like I was abstinent anyway. So on one hand, that made my job easy. But on the other hand, I think that by the end of my college years, I was, to be quite honest, like a little romantically and even sexually frustrated. And on top of that, I went to Washington, D.C. and was away from all my Christian friends the summer after my graduation. And so I was isolated and I was alone with my temptation. And I was around, I don't know if any of y'all been to Chocolate City, but summertime in DC, there's a lot of opportunity, let's say that. um, and I just ended up having a wild summer. Like, want to say hot girl summer? I'm gonna say hot girl summer light, because my version of hot girl summer probably is not, you know, some people's versions of hot girl summer. That's not judging, but that's just everybody has their own spectrum. So my version of hot girl summer is like I hooked up with like 3 guys that summer. We didn't have sex, but we went further than like I had gone with some people before. And it was like such a weird, and like I was in such a torn place is the best way I can describe it, because I knew better, I was taught better, and yet I was just doing whatever the heck I wanted. And at the same time, like there's this line that Lecrae has that says, "Body was loving it, soul was hating it." That was me. Like I was like, this is great and this is terrible all at the same time. And like I was miserable, and my friends didn't understand at times. Like at one point, my best friend asked me, like, "Do you even care?" And it's like I was in this weird place where like, yes, I care. Like my heart is broken over this, but I'm also having very compulsive behaviors, like very like just doing whatever I feel like, and I feel kind of like out of control of myself. And I remember a breaking point for me during that was going to my one of my best friend's weddings that summer, and seeing her. They had waited and they were Christian, and seeing her get married to her husband, Maddie and Judd, shout out to them, and seeing him like say his vows to her. And it showed me 2 things. It was like on one hand, I saw what like true love from a man that values me in the way that God values me can look like. But even more so, I feel like when he was saying his vows to her, I felt like God was saying vows to me. And so I feel like I was just reminded of like what I'm waiting for, not only in the natural, but what I already have in God. And basically, that was when I had a point of repentance in my heart. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this, where you repent in your heart before your actions follow. So that was when in my heart I broke down and I'm like, God, I don't want to do this, yada, yada. Went back to DC, still had a couple more falls. It was about a month and a half to 2 months later at the end of the summer where I finally was able to say no to the last guy and not look back. That's a whole testimony in and of itself, but I won't get into it except to say that I was just about making the decision and trying to decide what I was about to like do, and like got a sermon in my email that was like the exact sign that I needed, that was like, I need to just say no. And I haven't had a slip up physically with a guy since then. That was in August of 2017. So shout out to God for, you know, keeping me since then. After that, I'm like, whoa, what just happened? I need to figure out what's going on with me. I need to reconnect with God. Like I need to figure out like I need to heal, because I don't know what was broken, but something was broken. And so I gave God 90 days of singleness, because I was too scared to commit to a year, because a year sounded like a lot. So I was like, I'll give you 90 days, God. And I did this. I did 90 days of singleness from my birthday to Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, I had to decide, am I going to continue this? Am I going to stop it? And funny enough, Christmas Eve is that I shouldn't know this, but you know, you get older, your parents tell you things. So Christmas Eve was actually the night that I was conceived. And Christmas Eve was the night that I actually decided to give God the rest of that year. And so if you think about it, like I had given God 90 days. And so now I have 9 months left. And so the night that I was conceived, I committed to give God 9 more months. And I just felt like he was birthing something. And I felt like he was going to have me in a womb-like place where it's just me and him. And I'm focused on my relationship with him. And I'm focused on myself. And so that's what I did. I had that time. I had just moved to Chicago, had my first job out of college, listening to a lot of sermons, just, you know, living my life, just trying to focus on God. And something that actually Mike Todd said in the sermon that you listened to on Sunday spoke to me and reminded me of something that God said to me during that time. Because I was in a place of trying to like just not engage men. So the standard was, there was no standard. Just don't do it. Like, no, don't give your number out. Like, don't mess with them, and you'll be, and that's it. That's the standard. So I remember turning down a guy's number, like turning down a guy who, you know, I had met out at a day party, and he wanted my number. And I remember like driving to work the next day, and like it was raining, and it was like not raining that hard. And on my windshield, it was like enough rain to be annoying, but I could still see. So I wiped it away. And I felt like God was just like, yeah, that's how like these men are sometimes in your life. It's not necessarily the point that they're going to trip you up to the point where you're not functional, or you're not going to be able to serve me at all, or you're not just, that you're going to be all the way in sin. But sometimes it's just a distraction, and it doesn't allow you to see as clearly. And like, it reminds me of what Mike Todd said. I saw a clip where he was like, it might not be sin, but it might slow you down. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that's just like what God has said to me. You just need to be able to see more clearly and go towards God and your goals. So that was that season. I'm almost done. This is almost the current. That season, that was my season of singleness. That season, I'm not even gonna lie, it got cut kind of short, because that summer, this is so sad. That summer I met a guy who like I figured out very early on I couldn't be with, but he was funny. We really vibed. I was like, we can just be friends. And so I was like, I'm not breaking my season of singleness. This is just a friend. Now, y'all know God was probably looking at me like, and I'm like, I'm not even looking at God. I'm like, he's just a friend. We're good. Like, so that was, I got kind of emotionally involved with him. I did a good job of setting physical boundaries, which I do think is a win. Like, I didn't let anything happen between us, even when something almost did, I set a boundary. But emotionally, you know, like that feeling of being wanted, that feeling of somebody being attracted to you, that feeling of somebody wanting you, even if you don't do anything with them. This is another lesson I learned. I fell into like with him, and then we ended up being friends. And so I'm trying to turn somebody that's a temptation into a friend. And looking back at that, I remember like wondering, how is it that I got so caught up with him? Because it was like a whole year or so, and I feel like I was still impacted by him, and I didn't understand why, because I didn't let anything happen. And I feel like God was like, you got in bed with his words. The things that he said to me got a hook in my heart in the same way it could have if I had slept with him. When he said, you're so fine, and like, I think you're this and that. And I'm like, really? Got a hook, you know? And so I had to spend, you know, a lot of time, even though I didn't let anything happen, I had to spend a lot of time divorcing myself from that tie and that connection. And also I ended up getting involved in toxic friendships with him and other people, and basically had to learn a whole nother lesson there about listening to God when he speaks to you about people that should or should not be in your life. Because there was the guy in my life who I'm trying to make a friend out of a temptation, and my apostle Matthew Stevenson told me, once somebody's a weapon of hell against you, they're always a weapon of hell against you. So don't try to turn somebody that was a temptation into a friend, because they're still going to be a temptation. And so tried to turn the temptation into the friend. Had another person in my life who was a friend, but like God was speaking to me that the people I was hanging around were not godly company, and I still hung around them. Had a whole bunch of drama play out in my life as a result, and now am in the process of learning how to properly cut things off so that I can just not have distractions and drama in my life. That's mostly current. I'm finishing my master's program. I'm about to graduate, look for a job, and I think I'm going to apply to law school. And so that is the most recent thing that God is doing in my life, is that. So that's my testimony.
Girl, you said a lot. I like how you said, and this kind of ties into what Rob said before, was just being surrounded by people who think like you. Like, I feel like on this spiritual journey, you need accountability partners, because like, even like Mike Todd said in the sermon Sunday, he was just saying, you know, it's a lot easier to sin when nobody can see it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a lot easier to do things when it's not on display. And that's kind of how, like, when people fall, when it comes to like sex and things like that, it's kind of like, well, only we know, like, nobody really can see me doing this. But like, when you tell somebody, somebody's helping you do that, you have somebody holding you accountable, it kind of is like maybe I shouldn't, because they're gonna ask me about this, so then I gotta sin again and lie and say I didn't, or either I'm gonna have to feel uncomfortable and tell them that I did. Another thing you talked about, which Yvonne talked about last week in God and Relationships, just saying how when you're in that single season, that emotional connection because like we weren't built to be alone. You know, we're built to be with, you know, with someone. We're that companionship, you know, and all those things like that. So even like you said, it may not have been sex, but just that emotional connection alone can be like, child, that's not my single season. I'm like,
Girl.
I don't need no new friends. I don't need no new homies.
Okay.
I don't need no new random accountability partners. I'm straight.
Oh. No, but yeah,
But
no, accountability has been key, sis. Like I'm super transparent with my friends. Even when I was in DC, I text my friends every time I hooked up with a guy. And I told you, sometimes I even felt a little misunderstood, but it was even worth it because at the end of the day, they helped me. They prayed me through that. You know what I mean? And they were there for me through it. So accountability, please. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Yeah. Somebody in some comments before was like, oh, she need to have a whole nother slide. But yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. Like I said to Rob, stick around in the comments. People probably gonna have questions and comments because apparently my followers like to talk. I found out
Feel free to
last week.
DM me.
So yeah, and there you guys go. Feel free to DM her after this. Y'all got any more exclusive questions y'all don't want us to know about? But thank you. I'm going to bring in the next person. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Of course.